Hi guys, welcome back to Office Hours Politics Edition with your host, me, Ziana Ali. Today's episode is one that I've been wanting to do for a long time because I feel every time a war breaks out, people often question, where is the UN? Why isn't the UN stopping this? What is the point of the United Nations if this keeps happening? And that frustration is completely valid. The United Nations was literally created to prevent another world war. It is the first line in its charter. So if war is still happening everywhere, what exactly is the UN doing? And today we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about how the UN was formed, how it actually works, why it structurally struggles to stop wars, the veto problem, the politics behind international law, and why people are so frustrated with it. And lastly, we are going to go into what alternatives exist. And as always, we are going to zoom out structurally and analyze. Let's begin. The UN was created in 1945, right after World War II. As we know, World War II was horrific. Millions upon millions of people died. Entire cities were flattened. We saw genocide. We saw nuclear war. And the global elites looked around and said, we cannot let this happen again. Before the UN, there was the League of Nations, created after World War I. It failed spectacularly. It couldn't stop Japan. It couldn't stop Italy. It couldn't stop Hitler. So in 1945, 50 countries met in San Francisco and signed the UN Charter. Here's the important part. The UN was not designed to eliminate power politics. It was designed to manage power politics. This distinction is very important. Now, how is the UN structured? So we have its main organs. The UN has 6 principal organs, but 3 matter most for war. First is the Security Council. This is the most powerful body. It has 5 permanent members, the United States, the UK, France, Russia, and China. And these 5 have veto power. Then there are 10 rotating members elected for 2-year terms. Only the Security Council can authorize military intervention, impose sanctions, and avoid peacekeeping missions. Only the Security Council can authorize military interventions, impose sanctions, and approve peacekeeping missions. If the Security Council is blocked, the UN is blocked. This is its first structural limit. Then we have the General Assembly. This is every member. It has 193 countries. They vote, they debate, they pass resolutions. But the General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding. They are symbolic, moral, political. When you see overwhelming votes condemning something, that does not mean that enforcement will follow. And then we have the ICJ, which we explored in another episode. But the ICJ settles disputes between states. But here's the catch. It can only rule on cases if states accept its jurisdiction. So it has no police force. It depends on voluntary compliance or Security Council enforcement. See the problem? Everything circles back to the Security Council. Then we have the voting issue, which is the core problem of the UN. The veto power means that any 5 permanent members can block action, even if 14 out of 15 members agree. Why was this designed? Because the UN founders believed that if major powers are forced into decisions they don't accept, they will leave the institution and maybe go to war anyway. So the veto was the price of participation. But today, it's the source of nothingness, of paralyzation. The UN frequently vetoes resolutions critical of Israel. Russia vetoes resolutions regarding Ukraine. China blocks certain actions or strategic interests. So when the war involves a major power or their ally, the UN cannot act decisively. And most major wars involve major powers. Not a coincidence. Now, the UN was built on 2 competing principles: state sovereignty and collective security. Sovereignty means states control their own territory, no interference. But collective security means aggression anywhere is a threat everywhere. These principles clash constantly. If the UN intervenes too much, it violates sovereignty. If it intervenes too little, it fails a moral mission. The tension defines everything. So let's get blunt. The UN can't stop wars because it's not a world government. It cannot override powerful states. It has no independent military. Peacekeeping forces are contributed voluntarily by member states. It relies on political consensus, and consensus collapse when interests clash. It reflects global power hierarchies. The P5 structure mirrors 1945 power. Now, why people are frustrated? Kind of a redundant question, but we're going to go through it. People see bombings continue, civilians die, resolutions pass, but nothing changes. And they assume incompetence. But the issue is deeper. The UN was never meant to override major powers. It was meant to prevent direct great power war. And arguably, it's done so. We've had proxy wars, civil wars, regional wars, occupations, and genocide. But we have not had a World War III. The UN is strong against small states, weak against powerful ones. And that asymmetry creates moral outrage. Now, moving on to, do we have any alternatives? People say abolish the veto, reform the Security Council, add India, Brazil, Nigeria, create a UN army. But reforms require approval from P5, including their own agreement to reduce their power, which they will not do. So we're stuck in a paradox. Reform requires the consent of those benefiting from the status quo. So what is the UN actually good for? Despite everything, the UN coordinates humanitarian aid, runs refugee protection, oversees global health, provides diplomatic forums, documents war crimes, and creates international norms. It does not end war. It manages consequences and maybe prevents escalation between nuclear powers. That's not nothing, but it's not what the people want, what the people expect. So why can't the UN stop wars? Because it was built by powerful states to preserve powerful states while preventing another world war. It is a global stage for politics, not a referee above it. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth. The UN reflects the world. It does not transcend it. If power politics dominate globally, it will dominate inside the UN. The real question isn't why the UN won't act. It's why do we expect an institution created by states to override the interests of the most powerful states? That was today's Office Hour episode. Let me know in the comments. Do you think the UN should be restructured? Should the veto be abolished? Or is the UN doing exactly what it was designed to do? Until next time, stay curious, stay politically aware, and stay critical of the structures that shape our world.